Sometimes my work is considered about poverty, or it's about only the community on the surface. But really it is about survival. It is about how people under different difficult circumstances figure out a way, because essentially that was the way of my family. That's really what fascinates me about stories, is that the more I start to construct or imagine them, the more complexity and depth I feel I can give to my community.
That is an excerpt from an interview with 2023 MacArthur Fellow Manuel Muñoz, a fiction writer who depicts the Mexican-American communities of California's Central Valley with empathy and nuance. He roots his stories in the landscape and culture of his upbringing in a Chicano family of farm workers who made their living in the fields that feed the rest of the country. In this episode, we go in depth with Manuel to learn more about him, his work, and his exceptional creativity. Let's hear more from his interview.
There's something about the privacy of fiction that has always appealed to me. It feels like I'm getting entryway into a secret. The shield of fiction just allows you to do something quite different that I feel very comfortable in. It speaks to my awkwardness, my shyness, but it helps me transform things and hopefully produce the emotion for other people. Because it involves the act of reading, you're by yourself, and the story meets you and you meet the story. And I love that magic. I love that alchemy. I'm so meticulous. I tend to fuss over these words so much. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it's so hard to get people to think of stories even happening in a place like California's Central Valley, that I really aim to try to get it as right as possible. I grew up in a little town called Dinuba, which when I left it when I was 18 was about 15,000 people. My whole family still lives there actually, and I go back very frequently. But like I said many times, those are the kinds of places that I never saw in books. And the less I saw of it, the more I started to love it in my own way. It's a farming community, it's very agricultural. It's largely Mexican-American, both Mexican-born and US-born. I was mostly a doodler when I was a child, scribbling little stories to myself. But it wasn't until I got to college that I started to frame them in a way that really reflected me. Meaning I wasn't doing autumn leaves or East Coast and snow, but the landscape that was actually where I came from, which was orchards, vineyards, ramshackle houses. Around college is when I finally started to really take it as a kind of reflection or a kind of mirror, and that's what art could do for me. Zigzagger came about in the late 90s, and I always speak about the fact that I didn't realize how daring it was, meaning I was writing about queer experiences at a time when I was explicitly being told the community's not ready for these kinds of stories. I don't know where my stubbornness came from to keep writing them, to keep producing them. I thought they were important, but they weren't translating into a book that was appealing to a publisher. I finally did get published by Northwestern University Press and managed to get one big review in the Los Angeles Times. And suddenly people who were teaching at Southern California universities said, wait a minute, we need to use this in our classroom. And I think that's what helped me gain the modest, small audience, but passionate audience that I have. The Faith Healer of Olive Avenue was actually begun before Zigzagger was published. I was on the verge of giving up. And I said, well, just start another book. Just write the straightforward, recognizable, legible story that the world sees, but just put your people in it. That's what I did. I'm usually always starting with an image, something that is unsettling me, Sometimes it is a bit of a story that someone has told me in my family that I focus on. I try to visualize it, picture it. A little green car, the last nectarine that my dad says he remembers pulling from the branch, and trying to visualize and then build outward. It's usually things that startle me or unsettle me in some way that require me to make sense of it, to make sense of the mystery. In a story like Susto, for example, which involves, it's sort of a Gothic tale of a man who's found in a vineyard with his head in the ground. That came from a dream. And I remember when I woke up, I thought, I must have seen this in a movie or I read this in a book, and I couldn't place it. And I said, well, then it's got to explain itself via story. And I built outward. Who is the person? Why is he willing to come back as a ghost? Who is he haunting? And I feel like, to a certain degree, like a journalist. I ask all of those questions: who, what, when, where, why, how. They're completely important to me in shaping the story. And then sometimes, to build the mystery, I take out some of those answers and leave them for myself, for the privacy of my imagination. Sometimes my work is considered about poverty, or it's about only the community on the surface. But really it is about survival. It is about how people under different difficult circumstances figure out a way, because essentially that was the way of my family. Most of the stories that I cherish very much in my family are really about how they are in the position to now tell it. Why are they remembering it so often? Why do they feel compelled to tell other people? It's never about, look how terrible my clothes were, but how about the story of where I got them? That's really what fascinates me about stories, is that it's about a process. And the more I start to construct or imagine them, the more complexity and depth I feel I can give to my community. My characters are mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters. Those roles mean different things to us. Sometimes it's an absent father. Sometimes it is a mother who is adoring. Sometimes it is a brother who is wayward. Sometimes it is a sister who's smothering. Every single moment I feel I need to define them. That's why, I never feel that my community is as small as the world seems to insist that it is. Because within it are all of these deviations, all of these permutations of people that can come in all sorts of ways. And that's why the stories, I feel, can always stay in what sometimes people will call dismissingly the domestic. It's a story of family and how we construct our families when they're not recognizable to other people. Some of my greatest or most moving moments when I do readings or conversations at universities and colleges have been in the Central Valley, when the students in the audience suddenly realize that the town I'm talking about is Orange Cove. And they realize, that view of the mountains with the garbage cans and the streets without curbs is exactly like mine. And that becomes, I think, a spark of the imagination and also the spark of participation. Suddenly you might want to also read and write and be together in what literature starts to offer. I think when people finally feel comfortable telling a story, they're also telling you that they're trusting you. They're trusting you with perhaps something that has been a long-held secret or long-held pain, and that the story is being offered to you, hopefully without judgment. I think that's, again, why I write stories, is I'm trusting people on the other side to understand who I'm writing about and why I'm writing about them. That's what I hope to inspire, is a sense of exchange. We're both reading and listening, hearing and feeling.
Manuel Muñoz is a professor of English at the University of Arizona. He often speaks with students across the country and shares his experience as a first-generation college graduate. His work is frequently published in journals, magazines, and prestigious anthologies. The MacArthur Fellows Program identifies and supports extraordinarily creative individuals with a track record of excellence who demonstrate the ability to impact society in significant and beneficial ways through their pioneering work. To learn more, visit us at macfound.org.